Sophia gazed out the window of her meticulously maintained suburban home, the morning sun casting warm light on the polished floors. In the distance, Andrew's car pulled into the driveway. She smiled, her heart swelling with the familiar rhythm of their life together. 9 years of marriage, a seemingly perfect union built on shared dreams and quiet stability. Andrew stepped inside, his tailored suit slightly wrinkled from the long drive back from court. He loosened his tie and kissed her on the cheek, a quick, practiced motion that had once sent shivers through her but now felt like muscle memory. "How was the case?" Sophia asked as she set his plate of grilled salmon and asparagus on the table. "Another late one tomorrow," Andrew replied with a sigh, sinking into the chair. "Lehman's case is a beast." Sophia nodded, suppressing the flicker of disappointment. "You work so hard," she said softly, sitting across from him. Andrew smiled, tired but genuine. "It'll be worth it soon, Soph, I promise." Later that evening, as Sophia folded laundry in the bedroom, she noticed Andrew's phone buzzing on the nightstand. A preview of a message caught her eye. "Don't forget about tomorrow. Can't wait to see you." Her stomach tightened. Before she could process the thought, Andrew stepped out of the bathroom, a towel slung over his shoulder. He glanced at the phone, his expression unreadable as he picked it up and locked the screen. Sophia forced a smile, but the unease settled deep in her chest. Sophia's mother, Claudia, always exuded an air of control. Twice divorced, she saw herself as a survivor of marriage and a master of relationships. Her weekly lunches with Sophia were equal parts affection and critique. "You look tired," Claudia said, her eyes scanning Sophia's face over the rim of her martini glass. "I'm fine," Sophia replied, her smile tight. Claudia leaned in, her voice soft but insistent. "Is Andrew still working late?" Sophia hesitated. "He's just busy. Big cases." Claudia clicked her tongue. "Big cases, big egos, big mistakes. Darling, men like Andrew don't stay perfect forever. You need to keep an eye on him." "Mom," Sophia said with a sigh, "not every man cheats." "Not every man cheats," Claudia conceded, swirling her drink. "But every man gets tempted, and temptation doesn't wait for permission." Sophia's jaw tightened. "I trust him." Claudia smiled faintly. "Trust is good, but power, darling, that's better." Sophia attended an art gala alone the following weekend. Andrew had promised to accompany her but canceled last minute, citing an urgent meeting. The gallery was crowded, filled with the scent of champagne and murmured conversation. Sophia wandered aimlessly, feeling adrift among the vibrant paintings and sculptures. "Stunning, isn't it?" a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Sophia turned to see a man standing beside her, tall and sharply dressed, with dark eyes that held a magnetic intensity. "It is," she replied, her voice hesitant. "I'm Adrian," he said, offering his hand. Sophia. Their handshake lingered a moment too long, and for the first time in months, Sophia felt seen. They talked for nearly an hour, weaving through the gallery together, their laughter blending with the hum of the crowd. When Sophia finally excused herself, Adrian slipped her his card. "In case you'd like company for your next art adventure," he said with a charming smile. Sophia hesitated but took the card, tucking it into her clutch. The next morning, Sophia stood at the kitchen counter, her fingers brushing against Adrian's card as she poured her coffee. She had no intention of using it, but the mere fact that she hadn't thrown it away nagged at her. Meanwhile, Andrew's behavior grew increasingly distant. He spent more time on his phone, texting during meals and stepping outside to take calls. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Sophia worked up the courage to ask, "Who keeps texting you so late?" Andrew glanced up, his expression casual. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." Sophia nodded, but her unease deepened. Sophia confided in Claudia during their next lunch, her voice hesitant. Do you think Andrew could, be hiding something? Claudia's eyes sparkled with intrigue. What have I always told you, darling? Men hide things. It's their nature. The question is, are you prepared to handle it? Sophia stirred her coffee, her stomach in knots. He says it's just work. And do you believe him? Claudia asked, arching a perfectly sculpted brow. I don't know, Sophia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Claudia reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. You need to remind him who you are. Show him you're not waiting around like some dutiful housewife. Sophia frowned. What are you saying? Claudia's smile was sharp. I'm saying it's time to level the playing field. That evening, Sophia found herself staring at Adrian's card. A glass of wine deep, she opened her laptop and searched his name. His LinkedIn profile revealed he was an art curator with a prestigious reputation. Harmless, she thought. Impulsively, she sent him a message. Enjoyed our chat at the gallery. Thanks for the card. Adrian responded within minutes. The pleasure was mine. Care to continue the conversation over coffee? Sophia hesitated but typed just coffee. Their first meeting was innocent enough. Adrian listened attentively as Sophia spoke about her flower garden, her childhood, and her frustrations with Andrew's workaholism. You deserve to be cherished, Adrian said, his voice warm. Sophia felt a flicker of guilt but dismissed it. She wasn't doing anything wrong, or so she told herself. Their next meeting was less innocent. A lingering touch, a stolen glance, and finally, a kiss that left Sophia breathless. One night, unable to bear the tension any longer, Sophia unlocked Andrew's laptop while he showered. Among his work emails, she found a chain of messages between him and a woman named Vanessa. Her heart sank as she read, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait for tomorrow." When Andrew emerged from the bathroom, Sophia confronted him, the laptop trembling in her hands. Who is Vanessa? Andrew's face went pale. Andrew stared at Sophia, his towel hanging loosely over his shoulders, water dripping from his hair. His silence was damning. Who is Vanessa? Sophia's voice cracked as she held up his laptop. Andrew ran a hand through his wet hair, exhaling deeply. She's a colleague, he said finally, his voice low. Sophia's stomach tightened. A colleague? You don't message colleagues about last night being incredible. Andrew stepped closer, his hands raised defensively. Sophia, listen to me. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? She demanded, her voice trembling. We had dinner, yes. She's helping me with the Lehman case, but it's complicated. His hesitation was all the confirmation Sophia needed. Complicated? She repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. So you are cheating? No, Andrew said firmly. I swear to you, it's not physical. It was... He paused, struggling to find the words. A moment of weakness, a connection that didn't mean anything. Sophia's laugh was sharp and bitter. Didn't mean anything, I drew this. She gestured at the laptop. Could destroy us. He tried to reach for her, but she recoiled. I need time, Sophia said, her voice cold as she turned and walked out of the room. Unable to face Andrew's half-truths, Sophia found herself in Adrian's world once more. The charm that had drawn her in now felt like a lifeline, a way to forget the unraveling threads of her marriage. Adrian greeted her with a warm smile at their usual cafe, pulling her chair out for her. His attentiveness felt intoxicating, a stark contrast to Andrew's growing emotional distance. You seem troubled, Adrian said, his dark eyes studying her intently. Sophia hesitated, sipping her coffee. She didn't trust Adrian enough to tell him everything, but she let slip the barest details of her fight with Andrew. "Maybe this is the universe telling you to move on," Adrian suggested, leaning closer. Sophia shook her head. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" Adrian's hand brushed hers, lingering for a moment. "Sometimes the hardest choice is also the right one." Later that evening, as Sophia replayed their conversation, a sense of unease crept in. Adrian's intensity, once thrilling, now felt calculated. Sophia's paranoia grew. She began noticing small inconsistencies in Adrian's stories, names and places that didn't align with what he had told her before. Determined to uncover the truth, she did something she had never imagined herself doing. She hired a private investigator. "Find out everything you can about him," she instructed the investigator, sliding Adrian's business card across the desk. "I need to know who he really is." The investigator, a grizzled man named Harris, nodded. "Consider it done." Meanwhile, Sophia's relationship with Andrew continued to deteriorate. They avoided each other at home, their conversations brief and formal. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen washing dishes, Andrew approached her hesitantly. "I want to fix this," he said softly. "We need to talk." Sophia glanced at him, her hands still submerged in soapy water. "Talk about what? The woman you've been emotionally involved with? Or the fact that you've been lying to me for months?" Andrew looked defeated. "Both. I'll do whatever it takes, Soph. Therapy, time away from work, anything. Just don't give up on us." Sophia didn't answer. Sophia hadn't told her mother about Adrian or Vanessa, but during their next meeting, Claudia seemed to sense her daughter's turmoil. "You're restless," Claudia remarked, sipping her wine. Sophia shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "It's nothing." Claudia smirked knowingly. "You forget, darling. I know you better than you know yourself." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "When men become liabilities, you have two choices: cut them loose or get ahead of their mistakes." Sophia stiffened. "What are you saying?" "Andrew's fallibility isn't the problem," Claudia said, her tone casual. "It's your passivity." "Power, Sophia. That's the game you're playing, whether you realize it or not." Her mother's words left Sophia uneasy. 2 weeks later, Harris called. "You're not going to like what I found," he said. Sophia met him in his small office downtown. Harris slid a file across the desk, his expression grim. "Adrian isn't who he says he is," Harris began. "His real name is Adrian Walters. He's been involved in multiple cases of fraud, primarily targeting married women from wealthy families. He lures them into relationships, gains their trust, and then uses them to blackmail their husbands or siphon money from joint accounts." Sophia's breath caught. "What?" "Your husband's firm has been tracking Adrian," Harris continued. "Turns out, Adrian is connected to Vanessa. She's his sister." The room spun. Sophia gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing. Adrian had been using her. She was a pawn in a larger scheme to sabotage Andrew. That evening, Sophia confronted Adrian. She met him in the park, where they often walked, her heart pounding with anger and betrayal. "You lied to me," she said, her voice shaking. Adrian smiled, his charm slipping away to reveal something colder. "I didn't lie, Sophia. I gave you exactly what you needed." "What I needed," she repeated, incredulous. "Yes," Adrian said, stepping closer. "Validation, attention, freedom. You were trapped, and I offered you an escape. You should be thanking me." Sophia slapped him. "You manipulated me, used me to get to Andrew. You're disgusting." Adrian grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Careful, Sophia. You're in this just as deep as I am. If this gets out, you'll lose everything." Sophia wrenched her arm free and stormed off, vowing to never see him again. Back home, Sophia told Andrew everything about Adrian, Vanessa, and her own mistakes. Andrew's face hardened as she spoke, his jaw clenching. I can't believe this," he said. "Adrian and Vanessa, they've been targeting me for months." "And you?" "I didn't know," Sophia interjected. "I swear, Andrew, I didn't know." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We have to stop them. Together." Sophia sat across from Andrew in the dimly lit kitchen, her hands clenched tightly around a mug of now cold tea. It was the first time in months they'd sat together like this, truly together, with no pretense or avoidance. Andrew's laptop lay open between them, displaying folders of information on Adrian and Vanessa's schemes. "We can't go to the police yet," Andrew said, his voice low but resolute. "Not without concrete evidence that ties Adrian and Vanessa to something criminal. Right now, all we have is circumstantial connections." Sophia frowned. "What about your firm? Couldn't they help?" Andrew shook his head. "Not officially. If word gets out that I've been compromised, it could ruin my career. But," he added, his expression darkening, "there are people at the firm who might help us off the record." Sophia nodded, her mind racing. "What about Adrian's history? Harris said he's done this before. There must be victims who'd be willing to come forward." "Possibly," Andrew agreed, "but tracking them down will take time. We need to act now before they strike again." For the first time, Sophia saw the weight Andrew had been carrying. His usual confidence was still there, but it was tempered by exhaustion and a desperation she hadn't noticed before. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Andrew looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For letting it get this far," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "For not trusting you, for—" Andrew reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "We both made mistakes, Soph. But right now, we need to focus on fixing this. Together." The next day, Andrew reached out to one of his colleagues, Marcus, a tech-savvy investigator within the firm who specialized in uncovering fraud. Marcus had a reputation for being discreet, and Andrew trusted him enough to share the barest details of the situation. Meanwhile, Sophia contacted Harris, asking him to dig deeper into Adrian's past victims. If they could connect the dots between Adrian's prior scams and his current plot, they might have a chance to expose him. Over the next week, Sophia and Andrew worked in tandem, sharing late nights poring over files and crafting a plan. The goal was simple: bait Adrian into revealing his true intentions. "Still thinks you're under his thumb," Andrew said one evening, his eyes scanning the notes they'd compiled. "We use that. Let him think he's won." Sophia swallowed hard. "You want me to meet him again?" "Yes," Andrew said, his tone grim, "but this time we'll be ready." The restaurant Adrian chose for their meeting was upscale and discreet, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Sophia arrived dressed in a sleek black dress, her nerves masked by a practiced air of confidence. She carried a small clutch containing a recording device Marcus had provided, her lifeline in this dangerous game. Adrian greeted her with his usual charm, rising to kiss her cheek. "You look stunning," he said, pulling out her chair. Sophia forced a smile. "You're flattering me." "Only because it's true," Adrian replied, his dark eyes studying her. As they talked, Sophia kept the conversation light, steering it toward Andrew and the supposed troubles in their marriage. Adrian listened attentively, his demeanor warm but calculating. When the waiter cleared their plates, Adrian leaned closer, his voice dropping. "I know things have been difficult for you, Sophia, but you don't have to keep suffering. There's a way out." Sophia tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "A way out?" Adrian smirked. Leave, Andrew. I can help you. We can start fresh. Together. Her stomach churned, but she maintained her composure. And how would that work exactly? Adrian's eyes gleamed. You'd need to cut ties with him financially, of course. Secure your own accounts. I can guide you through it, make it seamless. It was the opening they had been waiting for. As Sophia excused herself to the restroom, Adrian's confidence remained unshaken. He had no idea that Marcus, seated at a nearby table disguised as a casual diner, had intercepted every word through Sophia's recording device. Back at the house, Andrew and Marcus listened to the live feed, their expressions grim. Got him, Marcus muttered, typing furiously on his laptop. I'm cross-referencing his voice with known recordings from his other aliases. If we can link this to prior scams, we'll have enough to involve the authorities. Andrew's jaw tightened. He won't see it coming. Sophia returned to the table, her smile strained. Adrian reached across to take her hand, but she resisted the urge to pull away. Think about what I said, Adrian murmured. I will, Sophia replied, her voice steady. 2 days later, Adrian received an invitation to meet Sophia at a secluded park. He arrived expecting another intimate conversation, but instead he found Andrew waiting for him. What the hell is this? Adrian snapped, his usual charm replaced by anger. Andrew crossed his arms, his expression cold. This is the end of the line for you. Before Adrian could respond, Harris and Marcus emerged from the shadows, accompanied by 2 police officers. We have enough evidence to charge you with fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft, Marcus said. It's over. Adrian's face twisted with rage. You think this will stop me? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you, Andrew shot back. As the officers cuffed Adrian, Sophia watched from a distance, her heart pounding. She felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. Fear of the secret still lingering in her marriage, and of the damage she had helped set in motion. Sophia sat on the edge of the garden bench, her hands resting on the cool wrought iron as she watched the sunrise creep over the horizon. The soft glow of dawn bathed the flowers in hues of gold and crimson, the petals trembling in the morning breeze. It had been 3 months since Adrian and Vanessa's arrest, 3 months since her seemingly perfect life had cracked wide open to reveal the messy truths beneath. But today wasn't about shadows. It was about stepping into the light, or so she hoped. Behind her, the faint creak of the porch steps announced Andrew's approach. She turned slightly, catching sight of him carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He looked different now, older, wearier, but also softer in a way that tugged at her heart. Still your favorite, he said, handing her a mug of hazelnut coffee, the scent curling into the crisp air. Thanks, she murmured, taking the mug and wrapping her hands around its warmth. For a long moment they sat in silence, the kind that no longer felt heavy with unspoken accusations, but rather filled with a tentative peace. The last few months had been a whirlwind of revelations and consequences. Adrian's network of fraud had been deeper than anyone had anticipated, stretching across multiple states and ensnaring more than a dozen victims. Vanessa, once confident in her schemes, had crumbled under interrogation, trading names and details for a lighter sentence. But the most shocking twist came weeks after the arrests, when Marcus uncovered emails linking Adrian to Claudia. Sophia had stared at Marcus in disbelief as he laid out the evidence, correspondence that spanned years, detailing Claudia's knowledge of Adrian's scams and her subtle involvement in connecting him to potential targets. She knew, Marcus had said grimly. Your mother knew exactly who Adrian was when she encouraged you to meet him. The realization had hit Sophia like a blow to the chest. Her own mother, the woman who had claimed to protect her, to guide her, had placed her in Adrian's path. Sophia hadn't spoken to Claudia since. She had written a letter, laying bare her anger, her heartbreak, and her decision to cut ties. It had been both liberating and devastating. The woman who had loomed so large in her life was now just a shadow on the periphery. "She's toxic," Andrew had told her when she confessed everything. "Walking away is the best thing you can do. For you, for us." And yet, Sophia couldn't help but feel the ache of her mother's betrayal, even now. As the sun climbed higher, Sophia turned to Andrew, studying his profile. He had started to look more like the man she had fallen in love with. The lines of stress around his eyes had softened, and his smiles, though still rare, no longer felt forced. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked suddenly. Andrew looked at her, his brows furrowing. "Think about what?" "I yell of it," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Adrian, Vanessa, the lies, us." Andrew sighed, setting his coffee down on the bench beside him. "Every day," he admitted. "But not in the way you think." Sophia tilted her head, curious. "I used to replay everything in my mind," he said, his voice low. "All the mistakes I made, all the ways I failed you. But now, I think about how we survived it, how we're still here, talking about a future instead of letting it destroy us." Sophia felt a lump rise in her throat. "You make it sound so simple." Andrew smiled faintly, his gaze steady. "It's not, but it's worth it. You're worth it." Later that morning, as Sophia tended to the garden, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Each flower she pruned, each weed she pulled, felt like a small act of reclaiming herself. The garden, much like her life, was a work in progress, messy, imperfect, but full of potential. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke her thoughts. She straightened, wiping her hands on her apron as Marcus stepped out of his car, holding a sealed envelope. "You didn't tell me you were coming," Sophia said, surprised. "I thought you'd want to see this in person," Marcus replied, handing her the envelope. Sophia opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the document inside. Her breath caught. "What is it?" Andrew asked, joining her on the porch. Sophia handed him the paper, her hands trembling. "It's from Vanessa's deposition." The document detailed Vanessa's full confession, including a chilling detail. Adrian's final plan had been to not only extort money from Andrew, but to use Sophia's vulnerabilities, her doubts, her fears, to fracture their marriage permanently. "They didn't just want to win," Sophia whispered, her voice hollow. "He wanted to destroy us." Andrew folded the paper and placed it on the porch railing. "But he didn't," he said firmly. "He failed." That evening, Sophia sat alone in the living room, the faint glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. Her mind wandered back to the early days of her marriage, the laughter, the certainty that they were untouchable. That certainty was gone now, replaced by something more fragile, but also more real. Trust wasn't a given anymore. It was something they rebuilt every day, brick by brick. As Andrew joined her, sitting close enough for their shoulders to touch, Sophia realized that maybe, just maybe, this new foundation was stronger than the one they had before. She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I'm ready," she said softly. Andrew looked at her, his expression tender. "For what?" "For us," Sophia replied. "For what comes next." The shadows of the past lingered, but they no longer held power over her. Sophia had found her light, and for the first time in a long time she was ready to embrace it.